Hey Evergreen, I'm excited to be here with you this week talking about Lament. And when Jason and Laura and Adam came and said, we want to do a series on Lament, it was one of those kind of weird ones where I was really excited about it because Lament is it's just an amazing subject inside of the Bible, and it's something that we don't talk about very often. If you haven't had a chance to hear what Mary said last week on Isaiah chapter 64, I highly encourage you to go check it out. She did such a great job of setting up a lament where the people of Israel are basically calling out their sin. They're lamenting for what they've done and the things they've done wrong, and just praying, pleading with God that He would forgive them for it. And so laments can come in a whole lot of different variations. And we're going to get a chance to kind of look into a different form of lament today. And I'm excited about that, to be able to do that with you. And I kind of wanted to set up for us a definition for lament. And Oxford Dictionary defines lament as a passionate expression of grief and sorrow. And that really is what it is. It's kind of pleading with God. It's going into that journey into the soul and really kind of figuring out those feelings that we're having and letting God have them. And the expression of however they might come out. Laments come out in forms of singing. This can sound strange. I'll talk about singing in a second. Moaning, crying, wailing, screaming. So when we're talking about singing here, we're talking about sad songs, like deep, passionate, just feelings. And this is just anguish. Like when we talk about laments, we're really talking about people just bearing their soul. A couple of things I wanted to put out there is that the Psalms contain more than 65 laments, and those include laments of fallen warriors, of laments of illness, laments of victims of suffering, loss, depression. And beyond the Psalms, we see the scriptures also include laments of famous people like Hannah and Job and Tamar and Jeremiah and, of course, Jesus. And they really give us a chance to kind of dive into and see the suffering side of somebody as they're working through anguish. And gives us a chance to understand that this is something that we can do and give to God as well. And so as we step into the laments again, just remembering that they're a passionate expression of grief and sorrow. And if we're honest with ourselves, we understand that we deal with this all the time. Now, moving to West Michigan, and I just think in general people are really bad at this, but moving to West Michigan, I found that West Michigan people put on a happy face. And that's a great, great thing. But it's also not a reality, especially in 2020. Life isn't great. Life can be difficult. And so the laments give us a place that we see in Scripture is a chance for us to be real with God. And so we're gonna dive into a psalm in just a second, 137. But I think it's important too to understand Jewish death and its customs, because that's where a lot of these laments come from, is they come from the Jewish side of tradition. And so when you're looking back into the Old Testament and understanding how this works, basically when somebody passed away, they would be buried on the day that they die. I know that sounds different from what we're used to today, but they would be buried that day. The funeral would happen that very day that they pass away, and the lamenting would start. And so this is a time where people, again, are going to be sad because, as we all can understand, the loss of somebody is tragic. And in the Jewish culture, the next 7 days are called Sheva. And to sit in Sheva is to sit for 7 days in lament. And what this is the family gets together, and they usually pick one place where they just all congregate, and they just sit in their sorrow. For 7 straight days, it's a time of being sad. It's a time of just feeling the feelings and going through all of this. And friends and family will come along in this area. So friends will come and they will provide food, and they'll try to provide comfort by just sitting with them in this time. But it's not a time to try to make somebody happy. It's a time to just dive into the sorrow and the feelings that come during this time. That's what the lament is. I've had the opportunity a couple times when I've been in Israel to go visit some friends' families during that time when a loved one had passed away. It's somber. It's sad. It's not a time of a joyous time. Like when we have our memorial services for people, we try to really focus on the good, of their life and things like that. And Jewish people will eventually do that. But the biblical text for them and their custom is that you sit for 7 days just in all the feelings. And yeah, you're not happy with God. You're upset. You're questioning God. Why would you take this person from us? Then after that, they go into a time which is 30 days long. And this actually starts at the time of someone passing away. So you have the 7 days of sitting in that 7-day period of time. And then it'll continue on for 30 days. And this is a time where no celebrations are had. You don't celebrate birthday parties. You don't celebrate weddings. And people continue during this time to not celebrate, but rather to just continue to sit in the feelings of the lost one who's gone. And they lament, and they think through all of that, and they cry out to God. And even in the Orthodox tradition, men will not cut their hair or shave their beards during this time. And it's just a sign of mourning and lamenting and dealing with the feelings. And then after 1 year, they'll revisit that year of a person passing away, and they'll begin to have what's called a memorial service where they remember them. And they'll remember them each year after that. And I think it's important from the Bible standpoint as we look at this to see that lamenting, it's not an easy thing. It's a messy thing is what it is. It's very messy. Your feelings aren't just okay, and nothing's going to just fix overnight. And God understands that. He says, give me your hardest feelings that you've got. God, give me the things that are that you're feeling and that you're hurting with, and give them to me because I'm not afraid of them. And that's what they're called to, and that's what the Jewish people would do. And so as we dive into our text, it's Psalm 137. And many of you have probably heard this one before. And it says, by the rivers of Babylon, where we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. There's songs that have come from this. Bob Marley has a famous song about it. But this is a storyline here, remembering of a time that was not good at all. And so for us to be able to dive into this text, we got to understand what was going on at the time. And so as we look at it here, we see that Babylon has come in and it has taken captive the people living in Israel, especially in the Jerusalem area of Judah. And they take them away. King Nebuchadnezzar, you've heard of him before, he comes in and he takes them away, and they go 900 miles away from their home, and they're taken to another land, so to modern day Iraq. And they are taken from their family, from their friends, from everything else, and they're going to be in exile for 70 years. During this time, there'll be the destruction of the temple, which you're going to hear, just in this psalm, is a big deal to them. It's the destruction of their God, basically, in the area where they go to worship. And so we get this psalm set up because you've got a people group who are in anguish. Now, when a conquering army comes in and takes you to a foreign land, they're not nice about it. They come in, they take everything good that you've got, all your food, all your weapons, all your money, anything that you've got that they want, they take. They're going to kill a lot of people in the process. Anyone that they don't think is good to keep around, they get rid of. And they're going to also do a lot of things of just that you've heard of like they're going to rape the women, and they're going to take the children away from their parents, and like all of these bad things happen. And that's the context of Psalm 137 that we're going to be looking at here. Now, as you look at this map here, what you're seeing is you see Egypt in the far south, and you see Mesopotamia and modern day Iraq to the right. So Egypt in the yellow dot, and then to the far right in the orange, that is Iraq, and that's where Babylon is. And right there in the middle where the arrow is pointing out, this is Israel. Israel is in the middle of a trade route between two big nations. Now you gotta understand, Israel is not, it's just not a big deal. It's a small little place. It's a mouse in a cat's world. So Egypt is a big up and coming entity, empire, and so is Babylon. And they want control of the trade route, and the trade route goes right down the middle. So Israel is constantly in a problem where it's having to figure out who to have allegiances with. Who does it pay off for protection? And in this scenario here, what we're going to see is that Israel is going to be destroyed because you've got two big entities vying over power. Now, in your entire Bible, just a side note, the only time where Israel really has control over this trade route is during the time of Solomon. And the only reason for that is because Solomon marries into many different different entities, but one of the ones that he marries is a princess from Egypt, and as a dowry given to them, the big cities sitting on this trade route going through the area of Israel are given to him by the Pharaoh of Egypt at that time. And so he controls the trade route during his time and becomes wealthy. So we're going to see here is that Egypt and Babylon they're basically at odds with each other. So I've got a little timeline for you. And what you're going to see is there's multiple sieges that happen. So the first siege happens in 605 BC. And we've got the Israelites basically living in Judah and Jerusalem, and they've got their king. Remember, you've got two different kingdoms at this time, but we're only focusing on Judah in this area here in the south. And what happens is that Israel is trying to figure out who should it align with. And typically it's aligned with Egypt. But in comes Nebuchadnezzar, and he attacks Pharaoh Necho in Egypt and destroys him. And destroys his army at this battle. And so all of a sudden, Babylon becomes the power to be reckoned with. Well, Israel has to make a decision. Who will it follow? It's been aligned with Egypt for this time. And so Nebuchadnezzar comes in and shows them who's boss. And comes in and kind of wreaks havoc in Jerusalem, takes out their king at that time, gets rid of him, and takes away a bunch of different people off to Babylon, hauls them off. This is when Daniel gets taken off to Babylon. And then he leaves. So a new king steps in Jerusalem. And he's kind of doing his thing and trying to figure out what to do. Well, he kind of decides that he's going to align himself maybe with Egypt again. Not a good move. And so here we come in 598, and here comes the second siege where Nebuchadnezzar comes back, and he comes in, and again, he wreaks havoc in Jerusalem. He basically gets rid of the king that was there. He puts his own king in place, Zedekiah, who he thinks will follow him and do what he wants him to do. And then he takes a bunch more of the nobles and people away. And this is when Ezekiel gets taken away. And so you get these groupings of people taken away to Babylon, that 900-mile journey back to Babylon. Well, another battle happens, and it's, again, Nebuchadnezzar versus Egypt. Egypt wins this time. So Zedekiah decides that he's going to get rid of paying off Babylon. He doesn't want Babylon to be in charge anymore. So what does he do? He stops paying. And Nebuchadnezzar doesn't like that because he thinks that Egypt is the new big powerhouse that he needs to align with. Nebuchadnezzar comes back this time. This time he destroys the city. He destroys the temple. He destroys all the things around. He burns Jerusalem. And so everyone, if you haven't been taken captive before, you're probably being captive now, or you've been killed. A bunch of atrocities have happened, and this is a bad, bad place. And so we are dealing with now a remembering time after the third siege has been done and the final group of people have been hauled off. Now, to give you a little bit of hope, the people don't know this in the time of writing of this psalm, but King Cyrus will come from Persia, from modern-day Iran, and he will conquer Babylon, and he will allow the people living in Babylon who are Israelites to go back, and that's the beginning where we have Ezra going back to build the temple, and then Nehemiah as well. So let's take a look at our passage here. Not a good point in Israel's history. We don't know exactly who wrote this, but it's somebody who was alive and experienced these things or is telling the story of it. And it says this: by the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. So Babylon's on the Euphrates River, and it is in a spot where there are a bunch of canals. And so, again, what the writer's saying is that they kind of have left their work that they've done for the day. They've kind of tried to get away from the people who have taken them in slavery, and they just go down to these canals where they get together with some other people, and they wept. And as they're remembering Zion, they're sad. They're slaves. They've been pulled away from their families. They're in this foreign land. It says, there, on the poplars, we hung our harps. You see, again, as we talked about before, when you're in lament, when you're sad, when you're upset, you don't celebrate. You don't sing and dance, and that's part of the Jewish culture is to be happy and to sing and to dance and to be joyous. And if you ever get a chance to go to Israel, you'll notice that they love to sing. They love to be happy. They love to remember the good things. In this lament here, we get none of that. It says we've put down our harps, we've put down our ways of playing music, and we've hung them in the trees because there's no more singing. There's no more being joyous. For there our captors asked us, will you sing us songs? Our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They're coming to him going, hey, you know what? We've captured you. You are our slaves. So sing us some songs. Sing us something fun. Lift up our spirits. And then check out what the writer says here. They said, sing us one of the songs of Zion. Sing us one of the songs of your place where you were free. Sing us one of the songs of a place that you were happy and that you care about. You've been taken captive. You've been stripped away from your family. People have been killed. Mothers and fathers taken away and separated from their children. Taken to a foreign land. And now you're demanded by the people who have taken you there to sing them a happy song. Sing us one of the songs of your God from back in your country. They're mocking them. They're basically saying, your God doesn't exist. You've lost. Sing us one of those songs so that we can revel in it. And it says, sing us the songs of Zion. And the writer says, how can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land? And I love what they say here. If I forget you, Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. It's basically sitting there saying, there is no chance as long as I can remember Jerusalem, as I can remember my home, as I can remember the temple, as I can remember our God, that I will play you a song. That I will give in to these things. And if I do forget Jerusalem, basically going, Lord, make it so that I can't remember how to play my harp. Make it so that I'm unable to even do what they're asking. Same kind of question as theirs. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you. If I do not consider Jerusalem my highest joy. You really get this sense here of this lament. They're in utter just dismay. They're in this hurt and this pain, and they're being asked to do something, and they're going, I cannot do it. I cannot do what's being asked of me, and I will not do it. Lord, give me the strength. And if I forget Jerusalem, and if I forget God, then make sure that I am unable to speak, and I'm unable to do these things they're asking. Remember, Lord, and this is where it gets crazy, because typically in Scripture, especially in what we looked at last week that Mary showed us, there's a resolution that happens. But not so in what we're about to see here. The anger is there. A lament is real here. There's not a resolution of hope in it. It just says, remember, Lord, what the Edomites did on the day that Jerusalem fell. Now, the Edomites are also enemies of Israel. Somewhat related to them, and we could get into that in a whole nother storyline. But during the time that Babylon came, Edom was right there next to them, and they were egging on Babylon. To the point where it seems that the writer is saying that Babylon is a pretty bad, mean, disgusting people that doesn't treat people well, and the Edomites just egged them on to be even worse. And so the writer says, Lord, what the Edomites did on the day Jerusalem fell, tear it down, they cried, as they said that to the Edomites said that to the Babylonians. Tear it down to its foundations. Don't forget that, God. Don't forget what they did. And daughter Babylon, doomed to destruction, happy is the one who repays you according to what you have done to us. What do these people want? They want the Edomites destroyed. They want Babylon to feel the same pain that they felt. Happy is the one, again speaking of the Babylonians here, happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. So not only are they telling you about how bad it was, but they're sitting there going, and these people were so bad that they took joy in taking our children in front of us and killing them, bashing them against the rocks. God, we're sitting here telling you that we hate these people. We are frustrated, we're sad, we're upset, we don't understand, we're mad. And that's the end of the lament. And you completely understand as you read this how the lament could feel this way, how someone could be upset like this. And I think what we need to understand as we look into this is that laments are tough. Our lives are tough. You know, as I studied for this, there's so many things that there's so many times, you know, as I was studying where I didn't want to dive into a lament because laments hurt. When we let our feelings out, they hurt really bad. And I know that as we dive into these things, God sometimes really begins to stretch this in us. And this past month has been a tough one, I think, for a lot of people. In my family's personal life, many of you maybe knew Alexa. November 8th, this dear 12-year-old girl passed away from 2 years of fighting cancer. How do you explain that? And again, that's, I think, the call of the lament is God says it's fine for you to voice the feelings and the things that you feel inside of it. Just a couple days ago, a dear friend of ours with 4 children just passed away from fighting cancer herself. And there's no answer to why God does what He does sometimes. But that's the point of a lament. Is God says, bring it to me. Bring me your feelings. Bring me what you're dealing with, and I can take it. God can take it. And inside this process of a lament, we begin to let these feelings that you can't even explain go to a God that only He can handle. So friends, as we sit in this time, I want to encourage you that learning from the laments right now is something that God has given us to be able to process through the tough times. Because we do have a caring God. And we do have a God who is bigger than our problems and our issues. And when things don't make sense, the first place to start when the world doesn't seem right is just to tell God about it. And it's okay to do so. I want to give you a definition that I've been working through, that I've read from some other people, and that's helped me with lament. And it's this, that a lament is a crying out of the soul. It creates a pathway between the already and the not yet. Lament minds the gap between current helplessness and hopelessness and the coming hope. Lament anticipates new creation, but also acknowledges the painful reality of now. Lament helps us hold on to God's goodness while battling evil's evil at the same time. I hope that's somewhat helpful for you as you understand lament. It's helpful for me. Psalm 137 says, just give it to God. Yell it to God. Scream it to God. Give Him all those feelings. It's okay. But what we do get to sit in as Christians is the hope that comes from Christ. And that's the whole point of Advent. See, lament, we give God all those things, but with Advent, we sit and we understand where the hope comes from. And so this year, and then as we walk into the Advent season, would you remember the hope of the light of the world who comes into the world to save the world? And I was just kind of thinking through why I love Christmas so much and why I love the Advent season so much is that there is hope. And in a time right now where 2020 has been hard, where it's been difficult, where we've lost, it feels like, so much, we can have hope. And like one of my very favorite Christmas carols that is sung, it's O Holy Night. It says this, O holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our Lord and dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining. Pining could be changed over to lament. I mean, that is lament. So long lay the world in sin and error lamenting. It's feeling the issues, the toughness, all the things going around. Till He appeared and the soul felt its worth. The thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices. I feel weary. I don't know about you. We're in a stage where we are a weary world and we need something bigger. For yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Fall on your knees. Oh, hear the angels' voices. O night divine. O night when Christ was born. Friends, I hope that in this stage as we learn about lamenting, that if there are things in your world that need to be lamented, you understand that it's okay. And that we serve a God bigger than any of our issues, a God who loves us more than ever, and that says, give me your struggles, your suffering, and your laments. Cast them my direction. And we can sit in the hope this season of the advent and the coming of his Son to fix the problems that sin brought into the world, and that there is hope.